Hey students, it's Miss Shofady here. We're going to take a few minutes to talk about the Constitution. The Constitution will be on your November 9th and 10th chapters 4 and 5 test. So we're going to take a few minutes to kind of walk through this called the Constitution at a glance. So obviously it's a much simplified, brief version of the Constitution, but there are certain parts of the Constitution that Miss Coffee and I require you to know for the test. So I'm going to try my very best to highlight the parts that we want you to highlight, and then I also will put two images in so that you can see what your highlighted version should look like. You don't have to print this out and highlight yourself unless you want to, but please do make sure that you are watching this in its entirety and that you're looking and listening to what we highlight and why we highlight them. So for the articles are not the same as amendments. The articles are separate sections. Amendments are more of additions to the actual Constitution. So we're going to talk about articles first, and we'll talk about amendments last. All right, so the articles that we want you to know, Article 1, which is part of the legislative branch. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight, hopefully, Article 1, legislative branch. So Article 1, legislative branch, is something that we want you to know. And it just tells what the legislative branch can actually do according to the Constitution. So Article 1, legislative branch. The legislative branch is actually divided into two things. So overall, it's called Congress. So you guys can see Congress is right here. But then the two parts of Congress are the House of Representatives, so I'm highlighting that, and the Senate, the highlighting part of the House of Representatives and the Senate. There's a lot that Congress can do, the legislative branch can do, but the main things that we want you to know about is their main function is making laws. So creating legislation or making laws. And then it goes on to tell what are some of the powers granted to Congress in the Constitution. So we're going to highlight 1.8.11 to declare war. Congress really is the only branch that has the ability to declare war. Most people think it falls to the executive branch or the president, but Congress is the one who will actually say, we will allot this much money to have a war with blah, blah, blah. They're the ones that actually have the funds and can allocate or give the funds to have a war with whomever. So that's something that a lot of people don't know. A lot of people think it's the president, but really it's not. The president actually has to ask Congress to officially declare war. Okay, so another part of this powers granted to Congress that we want you to know is 1.8.12 to raise and support armies, and then 1.8.13 to raise and support a navy. So you need to know about that as well. Okay, we're going to skip down to Article 2, the executive branch. So I'm going to highlight Article 2, the executive branch. Now, most people know a little bit about the executive branch. They at least know the executive branch has the president, the office of the president. So I'm going to highlight that. 2.1, office of the president. So it also talks about powers of the president, responsibilities of the president, and then we're going to highlight 2.4, impeachment of the president. So impeachment of the president, as we have talked about before, is one of the checks and balances. So Congress, the House of Representatives specifically, can actually bring impeachment charges against the president, and that doesn't mean the president automatically is out of office. The House of Representatives brings the impeachment charges, which means the president did something that was unpresidential, could be treason, bribery, or high crimes and misdemeanors, which is a whole host of things that get very specific. So the House of Representatives brings the impeachment charges, but the Senate gets to actually hold the trial. So they get to say whether the president stays in office or goes out of office. All right, Article 3. Article 3 is the judicial branch. The judicial branch is the court system. The main court, the highest court, is the Supreme Court. So we're going to highlight 3.1, Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, will hear cases that in a lot of times have already been heard by lower courts. So you have lower courts, but ultimately, if a case is important enough and it affects, people all over the country, then it might go to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court is the highest court in all of the country. And the Supreme Court is actually made up of 9 Supreme Court justices. So there's 1 Chief Justice and 8 Associate Justices. So again, 9 justices total, 1 Chief Justice, and 8 Associate Justices. So I like to kind of call it, when you think about Santa's reindeer, there are 9 of Santa's reindeer. The Chief Justice is like Rudolph. He's the one who leads everything, he or she. The 8 Associate Justices are like the other 8 reindeer of Santa's sleigh. Might sound silly, but it might help you also remember that there are 9 total Supreme Court justices. All right, so there's a lot more in the articles, Article 1, Article 2, Article 3. There are also Article 4, Article 5, Article 6, and Article 7. Ms. Coffey and I really just want you to focus on Articles 1, 2, and 3. So now we're going to skip down to the amendments section. There are 27 amendments total, and I know we've talked about some of them, especially the Bill of Rights. So the ones that I'm highlighting in this are the ones that you have to know. So you need to know all 10 of the Bill of Rights, obviously. Number 1, freedom of religion, speech, press, right of assembly, and petition. You also need to know number 2, right to keep and bear arms. Number 3, limitation on quartering of soldiers, which basically means housing soldiers in your house. Number 4, limitations on searches and seizures. You have to have a search warrant from a judge for police to go in your house or any of your other personal belongings to actually search your stuff. Amendment 5, protection of the accused in capital crimes, so that's criminal crimes. Number 6, right to a speedy trial if accused by, and then having an impartial jury. Number 7, trial by jury in civil suits, which are different than criminal suits. Number 8, excessive bail or cruel and unusual punishment are forbidden. So that's when you get a lot of controversy over the death penalty. Is that considered cruel and unusual? Is that considered excessive? So that's kind of a debate and a controversy. 9 and 10 really are important, but kind of are a little confusing. 9 is this list of rights does not deny other rights retained by the people. And then 10, delegated powers reserved to the states and the people. So those are a little confusing. All right, going over to column 2, you're going to have to know for the test, Amendment 13, when the United States prohibited slavery, 1865. Number 14, the guarantee of due process and equal protection of all citizens. And 13 and 14 and 15 were all considered Reconstruction amendments because they were passed during Reconstruction after the Civil War. So 15 is the protection of voting rights. Then you're going to have to know number 18, prohibition of intoxicating liquors, which is basically when they prohibited the use, sale, and manufacture of alcohol in the United States, and that was in the 30s. That was 1919. And then it was repealed by Amendment 21, the repeal of prohibition, which made drinking, selling, manufacturing liquor legal again. Not to forget about the 19th Amendment, which we've talked about, when women got the right to vote on a national level, women's suffrage, 1920. And then 22, the limitation of presidents to serve only 2 terms of office. So the last president to have unlimited terms was President Franklin Roosevelt. He was elected to 4 terms, which could have been a total of 16 years, but he died about a year or so into his last term. So he only served about 14 years. Anyway, so now there's a limitation that presidents can serve only 2 terms of office, which is a total of 8 years. All right, so 22, and then we'll skip down to 25. 25 is if the president, should get sick or pass away, that there is a line of succession to the presidency. Obviously, the first person in that line of succession would be the vice president, and then there's about 13, 16 other people in that line. If someone, if the vice president couldn't take that presidency for some reason, then it goes down to the next person, and then the next person, and then the next person, and on and on and on. And then the last one you have to know is number 26. This is when the voting age was lowered to 18 from the age of 21. So now, when you turn 18, you can vote in federal elections, state and local, but that wasn't always the case. It used to be that you couldn't vote until you were 21. The basis for Amendment 26 was the Vietnam War. So you can see the date, 1971. A lot of people really were upset that they couldn't vote until they were 21, but they could certainly be sent to Vietnam to fight in a war. And they just found that to be very unfair. So this Amendment 26 actually changed the voting age from 21 to 18. All right, so all of these things that I've highlighted, you are responsible for knowing for the test. And Ms. Coffey and I will talk to you guys a little bit more about that, about the articles and about the amendments at our later time. All right, hope you have a good day.